The Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi just put out a tweet that said and celebrated that Uber drivers are making a little bit more than $20 an hour based upon an independent analysis report. In this video, I'm going to push back pretty heavily using a lot of data and analysis that this report isn't good. Hi, my name is Levi Spires. I'm an Uber driver, used to be accountant and economist. This is the Tip You in the App Emergency Daily Drive podcast. Okay, so like I said, I woke up this morning and like most Americans, I opened up some sort of social media. I opened up X and I saw this tweet from Dara that said, always good to see independent analysis confirming the important role Uber plays as a platform for flexible work for more than 9 million people each month. And it's a retweet from an Uber employee, Andrew McDonald, that says, compelling analysis from HRA advisors. Uber drivers in Chicago, Philly, and Portland earn $21 to $23 an hour after expenses. That's on par or above jobs like retail, home healthcare, and far more flexible. Oh, okay. So like I said, in this video, I'm going to go through some data and analysis. I'm going to open up some spreadsheets. But first, let me just tell you my initial gut reaction. I think, A, the flexibility is right. They're right. Uber is extremely flexible. I could have went out driving today, but instead I read this tweet and I decide to respond. I don't have to get approval from anybody. I don't have to do anything. I can just say, you know what, I'm going to make this video, and as opposed to going out and Uber driving, and I can go out later and do it. So it's extremely flexible. The $21 an hour, though, that I had some questions, and that's what made me dive into the data and compare that. But the real key thing here is this idea where it says an independent analysis. Wait till the very end because it's not independent. So let's dive through my initial findings, and then I'm going to open up a spreadsheet. So my initial findings are things like this. The report measures 2024. So according to page 3 on the report, they look at all Uber drivers in these 3 cities, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Portland, whether they're full-time, part-time, whatever they drive. And they said, okay, so let's lump it all together. Let's do some statistical analysis of 2024. I don't know how to say this better than this, but it's 2025. It's November. It's almost 2026. So to say, here's what Uber drivers are making, that's forgetting that Chicago isn't indicative of Memphis, Tennessee, or anything else like that. Just saying, using data that's almost a year old, that's a really bad analysis. We need real-time data, and Uber has this data. Earnings are blended across all platform and product types. So Uber X, maybe even Uber Eats is in there. I don't know. Comfort, XL, Uber Black SUV. And it also includes part-time and full-time drivers. So it's like all Uber drivers are not equal. In fact, it doesn't even tell us the hours that these drivers work. It only just says in a given week, the part-time drivers drive this many hours and the full-time drivers drive this many hours. But it could be any car, any part of the city, any time of day. There's so many variables. So to homogenize all Uber drivers into one thing gives me the impression that this is really bad data. It's a bad analysis. And that's all from page 10 and page 11. Okay, so the data set is dominated by part-time drivers who only drive during the most profitable hours. So it's really interesting. The part-time drivers make as much per hour as the full-time drivers. On page 53, for example, it basically kind of goes through this. But roughly 70% of the Chicago drivers are part-time. But if you were to go part-time and full-time drivers together, the full-time drivers do more than half of the rides, which is really interesting. So if you're a part-time driver, you're only going to do 10 hours a week. You're going to, a lot of the times, drive when it's the most busy, right? That's the really good thing about Uber, is that it's extremely flexible, but it also has the efficiency, the ability to meet demand. Demand in Chicago on a Friday night during a Bears game or whatever. Well, I guess Bears would play Sunday, but whatever, a baseball game or whatever, or some concerts or whatever's going on is going to be much more busy than Chicago, at midnight on a Sunday night, right? And so the full-time drivers are out there trying to meet all demand, whereas the part-time drivers are coming in during peak times. And so I think that's bad data to just basically say all drivers make this when there's a lot of variables in there. A big one for me is deadhead time is mostly excluded. So for those who don't understand Uber driving, there's what we call active time, which is time we have with a passenger in the vehicle. That's, I think, P2 and P3 for real technical terms. But basically, I'm either going to go pick up a passenger or passengers in my car. So I'm active on a ride. Then there's online time, which is I'm looking for a ride. And that time is been limited. It's been, what do they call it? They trimmed that online time. So I turned the app on. They didn't count that as my time working. Basically, what Uber is saying, they trimmed it. And I don't know how they trimmed it. They don't explain, but I can be online for 40 hours, but maybe they only gave me 35 hours and 5 of those hours online don't count. But then it doesn't even include deadhead time. So like when I turn the app off and I reposition my vehicle. So in this analysis, I'm going to show you that there's a trip that I took that was really far. Well, I had to drive back for many hours empty. That's working. I had to work that time, but I wasn't compensated, nor was that time accounted for in this. There are also commute times. A lot of drivers in Chicago don't live in downtown Chicago, but they have to drive into the city. That is not included. How about time filling up your car with gas? How about time on a break? How about time washing your vehicle, whatever it might be? So that time wasn't included. It just included a trimmed version of online time, and that wasn't fully explained. Maybe there's a better answer, so I don't trust this data based upon that. And that's, again, on page 52, where they talk about that time being excluded. The study counts bonuses and tips as part of earnings, inflating the hourly number. And this is on page 6, where they talk about gross earnings. That's really interesting. Okay, so there's the fare when I take a ride. And then on top of that, sometimes there are bonuses. And we're going to address that more in my detailed analysis here, because that's changed significantly. And then there are tips. Okay, that makes reasonable sense. But when they did their analysis, the Andrew McDonald tweet didn't include those same types of data points for those other hourly workers. And I'm going to put that back in. I'm going to show you the comparison of the two. So bonuses are a lot less now. And so 2024 and 2023, I had a lot more bonuses. Bonuses have been on the decline for a lot of drivers all across the United States. And then tips, only 1 out of 5 passengers, maybe 1 out of 10, if you're not a great Uber driver, tips. I'm really, really good. That's a brag. I get about 4 out of 10 of my passengers tip. So they lumped all earnings together, and not all drivers are equal. And that's another thing that I don't like about this analysis. Okay, just a couple more here. The report uses engaged miles, very similar to deadhead miles or not being accounted for properly. So it's like they're only measuring the miles when I'm driving around looking for a ride. They're not counting that as a cost, or driving deadhead to and from places. So that's not a real analysis. And here's the main thing. Uber hired this company for this analysis, and Uber supplied this company with all of the data. Now, I'm not saying they're lying, but I wouldn't say it's an independent analysis. It'd be different if Uber opened up their data set to the New York Times or Washington Post or some, CNN or somebody else like that to do a detailed analysis. Uber paid this company. They took 3 select cities, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Portland, and said, here you go. And this company looks to me like they manipulated this data to make Uber look good. And of course, Andrew then Dara then tweeted out just to select a little bit of this data. I think there's a lot more to it. And so with all that being said, let's dive into my analysis. Okay, so I put together a spreadsheet and I analyzed basically this initial tweet with some data. Then I'm going to show you how I calculate and estimate all of my data. I broke it down by year, and then I compare my hourly earnings to Uber's, what they shared with some initial kind of just some test cases of trips. And then I'm going to show you a detailed analysis at the end why my earnings have dropped. Okay, so let's take a look at the Philly comparison here. First, Andrew says, and this report says that Uber drivers are earning $21 an hour. And that's compared to transportation occupations, flexible occupations like bartenders, etc. And then here you go, low barrier occupations, fast food workers. Okay. And they're earning $21 per hour. But the reason why that didn't sit with me is because I thought that doesn't make any sense. That $21 per hour includes everything. Well, if you're working for a job, an employer, 7% of your wage is actually increased because it's paying for FICA, Social Security, Medicare, etc. And then you also have benefits like workers' compensation, etc. So that $21 an hour, $18 an hour, 18, 15 here for each one of these jobs, actually, let's take a look at it this way here, should include 7% for FICA. Let's see if I can make it larger here. Okay, 7% for FICA, add that dollar amount into it, and 20%. ChatGPT and Grok both said I should add it at 30%, but I just want to make it 20%, trying to be as fair to Uber as possible. And then the tips. My tips are included, or Uber's analysis includes tips, but shuttle bus drivers make a little bit in tips, let's say $1 per hour. And bartenders, $5 an hour, maybe, probably more, but let's just say that. So the $21 an hour is here, but a shuttle bus driver, they make more. Home health aides make a little bit less. Bartenders make more. Retail workers make more. And fast food workers, Uber drivers make more than fast food workers. So when I saw this initial tweet, it just didn't sit right with me because I know that there's something not included in that. And with just a simple, quick analysis, you can tell that these numbers are not indicative or not comparison to this number here. You had to make a better analysis. Now let's take a look at my weekly data. Ever since I started Uber driving, I kept track of all of my data. So you can see it goes back all the way here to February 2020, February 2020, right before COVID hit. I started driving, and I keep track of a lot of data: earnings per mile, promotions. I just track all of it. Costs. I even use my taxable income to come up with a variable cost and my gross margin. And I've done this for every single week Uber driving for almost 6 years now. But I wanted to look at the data by year because that's what their report looks at. They look at it by year. So here you go. Let's see if I can shrink the data down just a little bit, give us all the data. Okay, so you can see right over here that over the last 12 months, I've earned $61,000 in revenue, not including expenses. I've been online for 18 hours. But you can see each year I've worked a little bit more hours and my revenue has gone up. Now this is online time. This is a very key thing here. That means I turn the app on and I'm looking for rides. My active time is when I'm going to go pick up a passenger or drop them off. And so you can see I have about a 70% utilization rate, give or take. That means 30% of the time I'm not on a ride. Either A, Uber's not offering me a ride, or the rides that they're offering me pay less than this. So if I were to accept these rides, my actual revenue would drop per hour. So I'm trying to maximize my revenue per hour, which is a real interesting distinction. They have a blended rate of this. It wasn't quite full active time, but they got rid of some of these hours, and they don't explain it in their analysis. So I might say I worked 1,500 hours in 1,500 hours in 2025 so far, but they're going to say 1,400, 1,300. I don't know, but it's more than this, less than this, whatever. The number of rides, the net fares, etc. So I broke it down by year, and let's take a look at the report comparison. So the main table, I think, in this whole report is right here. This is what everybody's touting this data. Again, that $21.29 right here for Philadelphia is right here, $21.29. And you can see Portland is $21.82. Chicago's $23.01. The number of drivers, how much you earn per hour before expenses, your cost per mile, and somehow, some way, they ended up coming up with a cost per hour $6, $7 to come up with your hourly earnings. And then your local minimum wage, which is not relevant in my opinion, because nobody makes minimum wage in America these days for the most part. So you go, okay, there we go. That's their data. Before I show you my data, I was just really interested in this whole analysis and the way they kind of broke it down here, because the cost per hour is really interesting. They already shaved and trimmed the hours, but they didn't include deadhead miles. So this cost is not the real cost of being an Uber driver. It's only the cost to actively complete trips is the way I could, if that makes any sense. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about that. But let me give you my data. All right, here's my data. My 2024 Uber driver gross hourly earnings were $35, which is more than Chicago, which is more than Philadelphia, which is more than Portland. And the crazy thing is this, I basically just do Uber X. I don't have Uber XL. I don't have Uber Black. I don't have Uber Premier. Occasionally I do some Uber Comfort rides. So my costs or my revenue is more than Chicago, and I drive in upstate New York. So that just is proof that the big city drivers are making less. The cost per mile is 28 cents for me, and that includes my taxes. So their costs are a little bit more, but here's the deal. They don't tell you the hours, so I don't really know. I couldn't figure that out. But my costs were $15,000 in 2024. That includes fuel, which is electricity. I drive a Tesla. Electricity, estimated maintenance, estimated depreciation, and my taxes. And again, my taxes are after the mileage tax deduction. So my Uber driver costs per hour were $9.93. Now that's interesting. Their cost per hour is a lot less. And I think that's a function of this. I have to deadhead. So I live here in the middle of the country, and I have to drive to places like Ithaca, Binghamton, Syracuse, Oneonta, you name it, Oswego, even Watertown sometimes, Geneva. I have a lot of deadhead miles. A good example is from my home here in Cazenovia. I have to drive 61 miles to get to Ithaca if I'm going to drive there. So that 61 miles is a cost to me, but Uber, I think, in their analysis is not including that, nor are they including the time, because I'm not online during that time. I'm just deadheading it. So my Uber driver cost per hour using their analysis, the best that I can, is $9. So I'm making $25 an hour after expenses versus $23 an hour in Chicago, Philadelphia, and Portland. And again, in Chicago, Philadelphia, and Portland, they have Uber Black and Uber XL and other things. I'm just doing this on Uber X. And so that's part of the analysis that's really flawed. Let's take a look at my hourly earnings per year, though. This is really interesting. So this is how much I make on the fare. I'm going to shrink it down a little bit here. $18 in 2020, 20, 21, 26, 25, and 26. So how much I make on the base fare, not promotions, no tips, or anything else like that. You can see per hour, I'm basically making the same amount per hour, actually, in fact, a little bit less than 2023 per online hour. Now, the promotions is really amazing. I used to make $4, $7, $6, $7, $3, but this year I'm only making $1 per online hour in promotions. Promotions have gone away. So in their report, they're comparing 2024, saying, look how great Uber drivers are making. But I imagine if you were to look at 2023, Uber drivers are making a lot more. I was making $39 an hour in gross. Now I'm making as little as $33. And you can see, here's my tips. And we have some other earnings, things like returning lost items. There's like a paid time off thing in the state of New York. It's pretty minimal, but I do get paid that. Yeah, so there you go. I used to make $25 an hour, $30 an hour, $31 an hour, $39. Now it's $35. Now it's $33. So when they're saying, hey, look, Levi, in 2024, you made $35. I'm like, yeah, but in 2025, costs of living for being a human in America or in this world have gone up, but I'm making less per hour than I did make. And that's the thing that's really frustrating about them putting out this report. So I can even measure the change. You can see that my earnings have gone down 4% from this year and 9% from this year. So it's 2023 was peak earning years. And I want to show you just as an example what I mean by deadhead time in miles and things like that. So I've got a couple of trips here that I'm going to look at. So look at this trip right here. I took a long trip on the 21st of this year from Ithaca to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. It was 3 hours, 181 miles. I did get a $68 tip. Nice. I really appreciate it. This is how Uber analyzes it, or how I analyze it. I made $271. I had to drive down there for 3 hours and 28 minutes, but I also have to drive back for 3 hours and 28 minutes. So a total of almost 7 hours. Uber's not including this 3 hours and 28 minutes in their analysis, but I have to because that's real time. What am I doing? I'm sitting in my car driving. And the same thing with the miles. I drove 181 miles down there, but I have to drive back. So the total miles is more like 363 miles. My cost per mile is 28 cents. So my total costs were $101. My profit was $169, and I earned $24 an hour with included my tip off of this trip. But if I didn't earn a tip, it'd have been $14 an hour, which is less than minimum wage. So the tip is so critical to that particular ride. And I wanted to look at these two trips right here from 2024 and 2025. These are kind of like some short minimum trips. And take a look at this. In January of 2024, I took a trip from Ithaca, the downtown area, up to the Cornell University campus. It took me 8 minutes. It was 2 miles and 2.28 miles. So for $4.37. Now take a look at this year, just a couple days ago, November 9th, roughly the same area back to the Cornell campus. The minimum fare was $4.32, but look, it was a 10-minute longer trip and it was 2.51 miles. 2.28, 2.51, 10 minutes, and 8 minutes. So they're comparing 2024 to 2025, and we know inflation's hit in America, yet here I am actually getting paid less than I did in January of 2024. That's what is so frustrating for Uber drivers. So let's take a look at the detailed analysis. Look at this chart. What this chart shows is my earnings per hour, and there's 3 lines. Basically, this is the base fare. This is the base fare plus tip, and this is the base fare plus tip and promotion. And these are weeks. So you can see I've been really busy. I've been driving a lot. And this goes back all the way back to, again, February of 2020. So there you go. So total hourly, fare plus tip, and just fare hour only. And I go all the way down through this data and take a look here. These lines are a rolling average of the year. So just a rolling average. So you can see my base fare, what I'm getting paid per hour, has been stagnant since right around November of 2023. It's been basically the same right here. In fact, it's even gone down a little bit. You can tell. And this is a rolling average of a full year for 52 weeks. So each one of these bars are a week. But here's the number that's really disconcerting. Right here in February of 2024 was my peak hourly earnings. I was earning about $40 per hour. And the reason why are promotions. You can see I got a big promotion. I bought a Tesla. They paid me $2,000. And that's what these things are. These are big promotions that are quarterly promotions or annual promotions or whatever. These are my promotions. But look at this. My hourly earnings have dropped from about $40 down to about $35. And that's because promotions have declined. And all that being said is in this analysis that they put out, they included promotions and tips. Well, the thing that's most frustrating for drivers is that the promotions are going away, but the base fares have stayed the same. That's the part of this whole analysis that HR&A put out. That's really not good. So in summary, what I wanted to show is that this report is not independent. It's clearly a report paid for by Uber. It doesn't mean it's inaccurate or that they're lying, but the data has been manipulated, whether it's the online term, what they call it, trimmed, when they trimmed the online time, whatever that means, versus they're not really comparing all miles and all hours worked by the driver. And then they compared it to other industries without really adding the real wage or the real revenue that that employee might make, in FICA, for example, or benefits and things like that. And then they looked at a year, 2024, which is fine, but then they put all the data of promotions and tips and things like that. When those numbers fluctuate, they only looked at 3 cities. They didn't look at all the cities. My assumption would be that Uber has all this data. They don't need an analysis. They're a data company. They're amazing when it comes to this. Just show us what the data is for September of October for drivers nationwide. Break it down. And instead of paying some consultancy firm that's probably incentivized to help you, make sure it doesn't, tank your stock price or something like that, maybe get somebody like Professor Lynn Sherman or the New York Times or the Washington Post or whoever to analyze real-time data. It's not fair and it's not good for Uber to be touting, hey, we're paying drivers a good wage last year. It's this year, inflation. And you're not paying the promotion that you used to pay. Now, I can only look at my data. So I'm just one driver of millions. But if you were to ask drivers, let's be real. We know in our heart of hearts that we're getting paid less. We're having to work longer hours. We're having to drive farther. That's not being accounted for by Uber to go make that money that Uber is sharing. I love the flexibility of Uber. Again, I'm making this video instead of going out and driving today. I love being out in my cities that I drive in, Syracuse, Ithaca, Binghamton. I really do enjoy it. I love meeting the people and the stories. There's a lot of good to it. Uber's flexibility is really good. You just don't have to try to manipulate people. That's the thing that's so frustrating. You could just tell the story the way it is and be accurate about it. And I think that's Uber's and maybe most big companies' major flaw is that there's so much riding on this that they have to manipulate and not tell the real facts. And I hate this. I do love data. I love the spreadsheets and stuff like that. But I want to be an Uber driver or Lyft driver, rideshare driver, or whatever, for as long as I'm allowed to before autonomous cars take my job. And I feel like these companies are just biding their time. They're just holding out. How little can we go with the drivers? How much can we manipulate the public until autonomous cars come and save the day? That's what I think is happening with this. I don't know. If you're a driver, put your comments in the thread here. Reply. Let me know. Are you seeing your 2025 earnings as good or as bad as 2024? What do you think about my analysis? If you are, I don't know, a newspaper or some sort of Professor Lynn Sherman, if you want to take a look at my data, I'll gladly share my data with you. And in fact, I'll probably put it on our website and maybe link it to this YouTube video. So again, my name is Levi Spires. I'm a very happy Uber driver that's frustrated by a global conglomerate corporation that basically is using our data against us, whether you're a driver or a passenger, to basically influence stock prices. And I want companies to be more honest. That's what it comes down to. Thank you so much for watching. Be well, drivers. I'm cheering for you. Be well. Bye.